That's the way they undermine public sector services, is by defunding them and then saying, oh, you see, that doesn't work, that's not good.
Now, there's a standard way of privatizing something. Like when Margaret Thatcher wanted to privatize the British railroads, the technique was defund them. And then when they don't work, people get angry. They say, let's do something. So you hand it over to private enterprise, which totally ruins them, and then the state has to come back in, big cost, and try to reconstruct it somehow.
Amtrak is better when it's publicly owned. When it gets thrown back and the government has to pick it up again, they put in new rails, they put in new trains and all that, and then they start floating stock, and the stock gets bought, and the private owners start milking that Amtrak all over again. They don't do anything to it, and we have to fork it up again.
That's exactly what's happening with Social Security. It's in good shape now when you read in the newspapers, as you do, that the big problem of the deficit is entitlements. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Social Security is a zero problem. For one thing, it doesn't add anything to the deficit because people pay for it. And for another thing, it's in pretty good shape. Certainly, well, the last of the famous baby boomers will be gone before there's any problem in it. That's why there's a big payroll tax increase 30 years ago to ensure that. But if it's defunded, it'll be a problem. Then there'll be pressure to privatize it. That's a huge bonanza for the financial institutions. It'll put trillions of dollars into their hands, which they can then use to make a ton of money with risky investments, which are therefore very profitable. And when it tanks, as it will, when the economy tanks, there's a technique. You pick up your copies of Milton Friedman and Hayek and Ayn Rand, and you run to the nanny state that you've nurtured, and you make sure that they bail you out. That's really existing capitalism.
Capitalism works, if it works at all, because it always has socialism to bail it out and to subsidize it.
American democracy is what we call a guided democracy in countries that we don't like Iran. So in Iran, elections are, putting aside questions of the credibility of elections, the candidates are vetted by the leadership, the clerical leadership. Guardian Council decides who can run. Okay, we're pretty much the same. Here, candidates are vetted by corporate interests, and the way it's done is that unless you have huge corporate financing and support, you just can't run.
And they're the ones who also filter out in the beginning with the very first primary. The primary before the one you get to vote in is called the money primary. And they, with their contributions, they filter out who will be the suitable candidates and who will be the unknowns. And who will be designated at the very beginning the front runners.
How can you know that I'm self-censoring? How can you know that journalists are self-censoring?
I'm sure you believe everything you're saying. But what I'm saying is if you believe something different, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting.
Reporters and editors who don't comply with that eventually run into problems. Reporters worry about getting their copy cut. They get passed over for promotion. They get reassigned to, some Siberia desk or something. And they get off the juicy stories, or they don't get them, whatever else. And they have these problems. Oddly enough, if you talk to most of the reporters I know who have given me stories about censorship, about top-down control and all, are ex-reporters. They're often people, I began noticing, well, I used to work for Associated Press, or well, I used to work for CBS, well, I used to. The ones who are still in there absolutely vehemently deny that there's any such thing like this. They get very indignant. They say, are you telling me that I'm not my own man? I'll have you know that in 17 years with this paper, I always say what I like. And I say to them, you say what you like because they like what you say.